The important things, you know.
That's
Yeah.
how human bodies work.
We're still animals, if you hadn't noticed.
Oh my goodness. I'm really glad that you were still recording that.
Well, we'll see if I have the guts to put that in the very beginning of the play. Welcome to another zany episode of Nerdy West Coast Swing, the podcast with pixels where the anchors are out of this world and the points don't matter. We're here to help you train your eyes so you can learn faster and dance better. I'm Cassie Winter.
I'm Alicia Marshall. If you're wondering who are we to be analyzing these pros, Cassie and I both have extensive training in both soloed and partner dancing. Cassie has about 21 years. I have about 23, which at some point we will need to increase those.
I know, right?
Anyways, tonight we are talking about anchors, which we have talked about before. However, it's a little bit different in terms of what we're focusing on tonight. So we are talking about settling versus holding your own weight. I believe Cassie has a decent preamble to it.
We thought this was going to be a simple episode, but then we went and chose 2 videos, and then we both started taking notes, and then we both kind of just wrote essays.
Yeah,
we put the nerdy in Nerdy West Coast Swing because we're insane. The first thing that I want to talk about for tonight in particular is defining settling versus holding your weight. Because settling in particular is a word that gets used in a lot of different contexts in West Coast Swing. So I want to make sure you understand what that means for tonight's episode specifically. For our purposes this evening, if you are settling, it means you are asking your partner to counterbalance your weight and or momentum through the connection. So it's not just an independent action you do in your own body. It is actually dependent on your partner counterbalancing you in some way, shape, or form. But again, in other contexts, settling with other teachers can mean different things at different times. And then holding your own weight means that the connection then becomes more about proprioceptive feedback. So you understand where your other person is in time and space, but they're not supporting your weight or your momentum in any way, shape, or form. And then we want to be really specific that we're not placing any value judgments on either technique tonight. We're specifically going to talk about how they're both tools to have in your toolbox and how to know when to use them and why. And then I wanted to talk about a couple things for leaders before we start sharing the videos. There are 2 things I want to talk about for leaders in particular. When we're talking about holding your own weight as a leader, that usually only happens from the post through the first half of an anchor. Because if a leader holds their own weight through the end of an anchor into a 1, that literally means the follow cannot feel the lead. So it's really important as a leader that you never completely hold your weight from your anchor into the 1 of the next pattern, or else your follow has no idea what you're doing, which is just a recipe for a bad time. So when we're looking at leaders to see, I see you laughing, Alicia. So when we're looking at leaders to see if they're holding their weight or not through an anchor, it's the front half after the post count, which is count 4 of a 6 count pattern or count 6 of an 8 count pattern. And yeah, I think I'm going to save the rest of my essay for us actually watching the videos. Is there something you want to say about follows in general while I go fetch a link?
Not necessarily. I didn't have anything I really wanted to say, but I will add on to that and say that, we're not trying to place any judgment, but there are certain times where each is more helpful. So I think I at least am going to be talking about some of the differences in how to work with that if one is happening and it's a little bit less helpful in that particular moment.
So our first video for this evening is of Sean McKeever and Yenni Setiawan, Boogie by the Bay, some undesignated year. Go ahead and go give it a watch. And when you're done, come back here. We will get you analyzing.
2019.
Okay, cool.
Not positive, but I think so.
I mean, what is time at this point, right?
I don't know.
No one knows. I have to do the thing. For those of you who this may be your first time, I do this horrendous thing where I go, and now to analyzing.
For those of you that haven't joined us live before, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat or unmute yourself.
Yep. So do you want to go first or shall I go first through this send out?
I don't care if you would like to go first. Go ahead.
Okay, cool. So as I was saying before, when looking at a leader to see whether or not they're holding their weight, the biggest sign is whether or not they're stepping onto the post count of a pattern in such a way to counterbalance the follow's weight and or momentum. And one of the things that Sean does throughout this dance, which is really quite brilliant, is that because Yenni is not giving him the weight in the connection to be countered, he ends up doing a lot of illusionary work to make it look like he's countering weight on the other end of the connection. But he very often in this dance is not doing that. It's an illusion. And I wanted to talk about one of the things that you can tell is, so this is the count 4. And he's stepping towards Yenni and he's not starting to pitch backwards until after this point right here where he's starting to collect his feet into his anchor. And it's very much underneath himself. Whereas you'll see a lot in the next video that we're going to analyze tonight with Myles Monroe, where either the body moves in the opposite direction of the follow to use momentum to counter the follow's weight and momentum, or the leader uses a delayed weight transfer with an extreme pitch for that weight transfer to kind of break themselves. They can also shape away from the partner in one way or another. So when we're looking at this one, seeing him continue to like strafe down the slot with Yenni is an indication that he's holding his weight because she's not able to reach the end of the rope until the very end.
Was that all you had to say about this?
Yeah. Do you want to talk about her anchor at the end or shall I
yeah.
move on? All right.
Yeah, I did. So basically what we see, so Yenni's really good at holding her own weight, which is great for a lot of things. And the way that she does it in particular, you see a lot of split weight moments and you see a lot of moments with bent knees. So what actually happens in this first one, you can see that she is keeping her center right up over her foot that's on the floor. But then in this last moment right here, you can see she kind of has her hip tucked and then releases it, but she releases just the hip, like her upper body doesn't move, and she releases the hip back in order to straighten that left leg. Yeah, that's her left leg.
It's just so many black clothes in that
I know, there's a lot of black there.
Square inch of screen.
Anyways, so she just sends the hip back in order to straighten the left leg forward, and straightening that forward is counterbalancing the hip being sent backwards. So she's still just right up over herself. She's not really settling back into the connection.
Yeah. And another thing to pay attention to is the only way a leader can feel a follow's movement down the slot for settling and or momentum is if the connected shoulder is communicating that. Mm-hmm. And you can see as she's releasing her hips, that shoulder, if anything, is actually coming a little bit towards Sean. Mm-hmm. But it's mostly staying in place and not traveling anywhere. Right. Whereas to add weight to the connection, it would need to go that way a little bit in order for there to be an increase in weight in the hand. Mm-hmm. Her spinal mobility, I will say, I am very jealous of. I have to do so much myofascial work to get my spine to do that these days.
I will say that the tucking and releasing is a really nice way to really enhance the look of your anchor.
Mm-hmm. Is it okay to ask questions as we go through this?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so as he's going, as they're sliding to the left there, he's traveling to the right, to my right down the slot, basically. And he's kind of going forward. In order to create that counterbalance, is it expected that the follow would just travel further?
I'll let you take
Or-
that one, Alicia.
So in order to create the counterbalance when you have a lead moving forward towards the follow, you really have to make sure that you're setting your connection. So wherever your hands are, if you are continuing to move the hand with the body going forward, that's going to push the follow backwards more.
So, and another thing to keep in mind, especially when you're watching this video, is we know that Sean and Yenni have danced together a lot. So they're already calibrated to each other. I'm hearing an echo, so if anybody other than me or Alicia is unmuted, please mute yourself. All right, thank you. All right, so they're really calibrated to each other. So whatever adjustments they make to each other, just in general as partners, because we all adjust to everybody we dance with, right? And we all have like a setting that we have. Oh, this is my Sean setting. This is my Yenni setting. This is my Myles Monroe setting. Because they know each other so well, they went into this dance knowing what that setting is. So there is a different process to doing this kind of calibration on the fly if you don't know, you don't already have a setting for your partner, if it's a true Jack and Jill, for example, or if it's your first social dance with somebody. So, and this is me making an informed assumption about what's going on, is because Sean knows that Yenni tends to not add as much weight to the connection. He's making the choice to travel more, which is another sign you can look for if you're trying to see leaders holding their own weight. Leaders who tend to do a lot of traveling and who might look like they're traveling more than their follow are usually doing so to encourage the follow to have more body flight and therefore put more momentum into the connection, which creates weight in the connection. Because there are two ways to add weight to the connection. There's momentum, and then there's grounding yourself when you're at a distance from someone. So for example, the way they are right now, there is a way at this distance for them to ground into their feet that would create tension in the handhold. And that's positioning and grounding. Another way to create tension in the handhold is simply just having momentum, the follow going wee like a cartoon character. That creates tension in the handhold. And so let's see, where was I going with that? So one way a leader can encourage a follow, and this is also relevant if you just have a follow with not much body mass and like they might be giving you weight, but they're just tiny and there's only so much they can give you, right? This is something I have to deal with as a larger leader in general. It can be helpful to encourage the follow to have more momentum to add that weight back into the connection. And so as a leader, if you travel more, that encourages that momentum to occur. So you see this a lot in this dance in particular. Sean does a lot of traveling to encourage Yenni to travel more and therefore have more momentum, adding weight to the connection. Would you agree, Alicia?
I would definitely agree with that. I know that when I was framing through this dance in particular earlier, there's a lot of moments that he really uses momentum in order to help her settle where he wants to, like he has more control of what he's doing in order to add that momentum.
Right. And then, whereas if you're dancing with someone, you've never danced with them before, and you're noticing mid traveling. So like, let's say right here is when Sean realized she wasn't traveling as much based on how much he was. I would then start pitching backwards and taking my energy that way to counter the follow. That's one of the things that I would do because I prefer scrolling as a way to establish connection, but that's because I'm a follow first. I'm quite good at scrolling to get to the end of the slot. So I use that in my leading, and really good leaders scroll to accommodate their follow. But there are, it's more nuanced when you haven't danced with the person. So remember, whenever we're analyzing champions, they know each other like the backs of their hands, and they already are calibrated to each other. And that's why pretty much always their dances are great. Shall we move on? Because I think we spent 10 minutes on the send out.
Yeah.
Okay. We were texting each other earlier going, wow, we need to work hard to make sure this isn't a 3-hour episode.
Yeah.
So this is a good example. It's not an anchor, but this compression right here, there's a lot of compression in this handhold, which is allowing Sean to be at this pitch. And you can see in the angle of Yenni's wrist and her pitch, it's a protractor. Anyways, drawing of the week, people. Not only through their positioning and shaping, but there was a lot of momentum going into this to create weight in the connection. But in this case, unlike an anchor, this is a compression connection.
I would add to that and say that up until that moment that you just had frozen on. Yeah, so you can see up until the moment where Sean puts the weight on his back foot, they really both kind of have their own weight over their own center. So like their centers over their feet. And then as he like asks her to come forward a little bit more, he is then braking and redirecting. And so up until like that right toe lifts off, he really is, he has his own weight for the most part.
Yes.
And that's the same with Yenni. Like you can see that that left foot of hers, it's digging into the ground. Ooh.
I went too far, sorry.
The left foot is really digging into the ground, which tells me that that's where her weight is. And then also you can see that she really doesn't have much weight on that back leg, that right foot, because it's rotated open towards the audience and just the side of the big toe is touching the ground. So you can really tell right there that all of her weight is going to be forward over that left leg. And then as he moves back like a little bit more, she's going to become, I don't want to say unstable, but unstable.
Yeah.
So a lot of kind of what he chooses to do to encourage her to give more weight is he puts her in a spot where she's like, okay, this is the end. And then he's like, just a tiny bit more. So then she really has to give some weight there. And then he is redirecting it.
Yep.
So we go from that where their centers are both right up over their feet. So it looks like kind of an H in terms of the weight and where they're at. And then as soon as he starts breaking, it goes into that compressed.
Yep. And then here we see Sean doing a lot of traveling again. So if we just compare the size of their stride right here, Sean's is a lot larger than Yenni's. He's really encouraging her to travel. And he's using the dynamic range of his arm. So it's extended here and he comes into his elbow and then he extends his arm here. And one of the things that's really another thing to keep in mind when watching Sean in particular is he's a very tall gentleman, which means he does not have to change his pitch very much to counterbalance someone. And that just adds a level of complexity to keep in mind. So one may think that through this, he's using his change in pitch to counterbalance Yenni, but he's actually not. He's using that predominantly to counterbalance himself. Because he has so much momentum and forward pitch through right here that his lower body, in order to stop himself, because it's not Yenni's job to stop him, he needs to stop himself. He needs to go from here to here with his feet out here to stop himself. And then you can see he's continuing to encourage Yenni backwards. This is a rock and go, however, so it's a variation of an anchor. But he doesn't start coming this way until the very end, which, like I said before, Like you can't hold your own weight 100% as a leader from the end of your anchor into the one of the next pattern, or else your follow will have no idea you're leading a one.
I want to add on to what you're talking about. So because we can see he had it set up so he can give her a lot of momentum to send her back. So right here, we see her plant that back foot, and you can really see that all of that upper body especially continues to go back over that foot. So she takes a really large step, and because of that momentum that he has given her, it really encourages her to like move right up over that foot, even though it's so far back away from her center. And you can really see that it, like that left hip really does get up over that foot and even a little past it. And one thing to note about this is that she has a little bit more tension already to settle because of the way that she's rotated, right? So she's rotated into that left arm. And so that requires less to settle into an anchor, usually for a follow, when you're rotated into an arm.
Yep.
So this, even though it doesn't look like she's really settling, she is because of that rotation that she has in her body with it.
Yep.
So I wanted to talk about this in particular because it's a really good example of him manipulating the momentum in order to encourage her to give more weight. So you can really see that he is, because he's leading multiple turns, that really bumps up the momentum and it kind of builds. And it allows, well, I don't want to say it allows, it doesn't allow her to like make a sharp stop and have her own weight. So she really has to follow through with that movement that he's giving her. And so he's taking advantage of that. And he follows through with this, right? So then he grabs her back, and as she follows through with it, he is encouraging that momentum to go downwards. So what's really happening here, because you can see she has her own weight again, but she still is counterbalancing him because of where she's at in relation to his body. So if you watch, as they go into this like deep squat here, her entire body starts right up over that right foot, and then she changes it in like a split weight position. But you watch, if you look at Sean's right shoulder and then where his hand is on her back, it's like diagonally down, which is where that weight is coming from. It's because of how far away she is from him, and then the fact that his hand is further down from the shoulder. That's what's giving that weight.
And I just want to highlight how excellent of a job Sean is doing counterbalancing her. Like he's doing like legit squat at the gym. Like he sent his weight down and back away from her.
Yep.
As opposed to just being standing and bending over and the follow going, I have been there. It is not enjoyable.
Yeah. Anyways, that's all I wanted to mention about this.
All right, cool. So you can see through this moment right here, Sean really scrolled away in order to arrive at some sort of tension for the anchor for this pattern. Because once Yenni is here, she basically kind of stays in place and just collects her feet. And Sean had to do a lot of traveling to arrive at any sort of tension through the hands. Whereas if Yenni had started shaping sooner, for example, like she could have come up out of this position and brought this shoulder back and around
Mhm.
away from him to create some sort of tension, which isn't necessary. It's just an option. So the fact that Sean wasn't having to counterbalance her in any way, shape, or form indicates that he was holding his own until the very end when he arrived at tension and then was able to lead her again.
Mhm.
And then I wanted to talk about this rotation right here. And again, this is another one of those, like, he can style it however he chooses. Connection is only one factor in something like this. It's also styling. But his right shoulder keeps rotating around because there's no end to the rope to slow him down. Whereas I really enjoy leading this kind of pattern and giving the fellow no choice but to travel a lot and very fast. So that way there's a lot of tension across the shoulder here for the leader, and then it resolves. And then you stop turning a little bit sooner. But you can see by how short and bent Sean's arm is, he's having to hold his own because Yenni didn't travel far enough away for his arm to be extended to arrive at any sort of tension. That's why his elbow is so tight into his side. Do you want to talk about that anchor at
I
all?
was going to.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
So this right here is a good example of her kind of holding her own weight more so just because of the way that she arrives and then releases from the anchor. So right here, you can see like she already has her own weight. So as she's going backwards, she still is right up above that right foot. And then she plants the left foot back a little bit. So that's just going to kind of break her and press her forward. But you can also see what she does is that left foot is kind of rotated at an angle. And then she presses the hip back and lifts the right knee to create that shaping. So it really does look like she's very settled, but she, for the most part, is kind of doing her own thing.
Yeah, so if we watch the connected shoulder again. So right here, this is about as far as it goes away from Sean. And she has this lovely S curve through her body. And she does swing her hips. But notice how the shoulder went that way, ever so slightly.
Yep.
So even though she's technically in a quote unquote anchored position, because the connected shoulder did not progress down the slot to increase tension, that means she's holding her own weight as opposed to settling into the connection.
I also want to add to that a lot of times if you're looking, it's very subtle, but if you're looking to see if there is like really nice settling into an anchor, you kind of look for an arc of the hip. And so it'll either go from up and round out down or down and round out up. But if you see them holding their own weight, you kind of see almost like a rebound out of it rather than an arc.
Yeah, it tends to be when you're holding your own weight, it's just a pendulum back and forth, as opposed to more of like a swoop down and back and progresses.
Yep.
And being able to hold your own weight through an anchor as a follow is a really important tool to have in your toolbox. Because not all leaders can counterbalance your weight, no matter how much little or a lot of weight you give into the connection. And you need to be able to make it look like you're settling into the connection when you're not. Like that's a very important skill to have as a follow, especially the more advanced you get. And then there are just times when, just for your own safety's sake, you want to disconnect, no matter how high level the partner is you have. Like it's an important skill to have in your toolbox.
Yes, I agree. And I will also add to that that the higher level that you're dancing with, basically you should be able to trust that weight more. So you should be able to trust that there's going to be more weight at the other end of the connection. Doesn't always happen, but in general, in general, you should be able to trust more going into a dance, that you'll be able to give more weight.
Yep. All right, let me check my notes real quick and see if there's anything I wanted to cover before we switch to the other video. Oh yeah, I want to talk about this. This one? Is this one? Do I have it marked correctly? Let's find out. I don't trust myself. Oh yeah, this is totally it. So it's hard to tell. It's like just on the left side of Yenni's body from our perspective, but you can see how Sean is pumping the handhold down.
Yeah.
So he's doing like a kickball change for his post. But because he's sending the center counterpoint straight down, when you have a handhold, arm, and you just send it straight down, because of that, there can't be tension on either side or someone will end up hurt. So a pumping down action happens because there's no tension in the handhold, and it's a way of setting a post. It's kind of like using smoke signals. It's like, hey, the post is right here, as opposed to actually manipulating body weight.
Yeah.
Does that distinction make any sense to you, Alicia, or am I just...
I know what you mean.
Okay. I can think of a better way to explain it before the night is over. I will share. But it's more like verbally communicating. Here, the stop is here, as opposed to actually using the connection to create the stop organically. It's more like, hey, would you stop, please? Okay, there. I think that was a better explanation. And again, he scrolls away in order to establish tension.
Yeah, and him starting to move backwards with that much slack in the connection allows him to be able to help her settle more, because he has more room to move his hand towards her as he's moving back. So you can see as he comes around and he's moving backwards, she's still like the connection moves towards her. Not a lot, but just enough to encourage her to settle a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because she's kind of already planted up over that left foot. So then as he gives her ever so slightly more of the connection, I guess. I don't know how I want to say that.
More rope.
Yeah, more rope. As he gives her a little bit more rope, it gives her ever so slightly more to move back onto.
Yep. And he's also adding rope by rotating the handhold.
Yeah.
Which is something I only encourage people with the license to do so to do. Rotating the handholds is a volatile activity, and one should be licensed in order to do so. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Yeah, it can be, but actually in this particular dance, he uses it quite a lot to help her rotate in and out of her arm to help settle.
Yep.
I think that one main difference that you'll see between Sean and Yenni and then Myles and Tessa, you kind of see the difference because Myles and Tessa look a little bit more like bent down into the ground. And then Yenni and Sean look a little bit more upright throughout their whole dance. And that is a reflection of how much settling is happening throughout the dance in general.
Yeah. So this is a video of Myles Monroe and Tessa Cunningham Monroe. And we have confirmed that Myles will be joining us for our Fun Size Leader panel in the near future, along with a few other names that we will drop at a later juncture when we have it scheduled.
They're
Anyways,
fun names though.
yeah, I'm a little jealous of myself, to be honest. It's going to be a fun time. Okay. Link to the video is in the chat. Go give it a watch. When you're done, come on back and we will get to analyzing. To the analyzing. So one of the things that I just wanted to highlight about Myles in general, both in this dance and when you watch him like all the time, is how artfully he uses pitch to not only counterbalance himself, but whoever he's dancing with. And as a shorter leader, that's one of his superpowers that makes him so comfortable to dance with as a taller follow. And I know this is something we'll talk to him about during our panel, but I just wanted to highlight it here for those who want the panel to be yesterday. So you could have a little piece of it.
The start of this is very cute.
Yeah.
So I think I want to talk about Tessa for a hot second. So Tessa is interesting because she tends to manipulate her body in ways that sometimes does not look like she's anchoring, but she is.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll kind of point some of that out. Some of it has to do with the extension of her arm. Some of it has to do with the way that she straightens the leg. But, you know, none of it's incorrect. But she just does certain things that makes her anchor look unique a lot of the time.
And that's something like I really enjoy leading her
Mhm.
because she'll settle her weight in really unique positions. And I'm like, ooh, what can I do with this? Because I'm in my brain when I'm leading, I operate under the follow is already naturally prepping themselves for something
Mhm.
based on what I just led them in. And I can just use it as a prep to naturally flow into the next thing.
Mhm.
This is similar to my order of operations for leaders. Okay, you want to lead A. You attempt to lead A. But because physics and your follow has a mind of their own, as they should, they'll probably end up dancing B, which could be very close to A, but it could be very, very far away. And your job as a leader is then to lead your next pattern based on what they did, based on the B, and not the A you wanted. It might seem simple, it might seem straightforward, but that is so important.
The end of that statement.
Have a moment, be disappointed that they didn't do exactly what you wanted them to do because you had a cool idea, but kill your darlings and lead based on where they are, not where you wanted them to be.
Yes.
Okay. TED Talk number 2 over.
So I want to look at this anchor right here.
Whimsies.
So if we go back here, it's interesting because you can see Tessa starts this by being really wound up into that right arm with that right hip really settled down the line. And then she opens it up, which doesn't actually settle her yet because she keeps moving sideways. So she takes that step right or with the right foot, and then she continues. So what you'll see is her elbow, as she rotates out, becomes more bent and there's more slack. And then she also has more of an arc in her upper body that's towards Myles. But then as she comes around the corner, right about here, you see the elbow moves a little bit. So there's some extension in the arm. And then also she rotates out of the like openness that she's in, the openness that she's in. Yes, that's what I want to say.
It's an apt description.
But she rotates, she takes the left shoulder, brings it a little forward, brings the right shoulder back. And then as she is settling the hip, she's really coming around.
Yeah, because right now her pelvis is facing the water, and then as
Mhm.
she rotates in, her pelvis is facing Myles.
Yep.
And so Myles is really feeling this right hip swinging
Mhm.
down and away from him.
Yeah. And so while that kind of doesn't look like an anchor necessarily, like if you watch it at full speed, it is. It is. She is anchoring.
Yep. And if we look at the connected shoulder again, like we were doing with Yenni,
Mm-hmm.
you can see it's hard because the camera's moving slightly towards Myles.
I know.
Yay, vertigo. But her connected shoulder does go that way, away from Myles, just a
Mhm.
teensy tiny bit, and then releases towards
Mhm.
him as he leaves the one. All right. Can I talk about Myles?
Yes.
All right, cool. I just want to make sure you were done.
I'm good.
I am suddenly very hyper, which is weird because I felt like I should have been hibernating all day. Anyways, so as we watch Myles do his anchor, he actually finishes with his right foot in front, right here. And he's using a lot of contra body. So there's a combination of his foot being out ahead of him and having this contra body where his right hip is back and his left shoulder is forward that is helping him ground really thoroughly in order to counterbalance Tessa. So he's not only counterbalancing himself, but you can see right here, he plants that right foot, and then there's a bit of a lag where Tessa keeps going a little bit further, and his head actually follows that motion.
Mm-hmm.
And then he redirects it. And for those of you who have not gotten to take classes from them, they like to talk about anchors with the terminology of boing.
Yep.
I will never say it as well as Myles does. There's just something about the way Myles says boing that is satisfying in my soul. But it's not just a back and forth on the same level. It has an arc to it, either down or an arc up. And it's a natural resolution of the energy as opposed to just hitting a brick wall and rebounding off of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so Myles is bracing himself in order to counterbalance Tessa's weight and momentum and letting her swing away and then naturally come back towards him because there's no rope. I think that's the most meta thing I've ever said. That swing content, yo. Also, funny story, as I was analyzing this video earlier, taking notes, I messaged Alicia and went, so I'm a 6 foot Myles when I lead, aren't I? And she said, yep. I've never watched his footwork so closely before. And I'm like, wait, that's what I do. So right here, again, you can see how Myles uses his right foot coming towards Tessa. But unlike with Sean before, where Sean would continue to progress over that foot coming towards Yenni, Myles is using it as a brake to not let his center go past that foot. And that's why that's how he's using his foot placement and a delayed weight transfer to counterbalance Tessa through the post. So that way, through the anchor, the tension can increase.
Yeah. Can I add on to?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So I wanted to add on. So really, like if you're looking at Myles, you can see that there is weight in that connection just based on how he's going through the anchor into the one and whatnot. But if you look at Tessa, it kind of doesn't look like there is weight. But if you look really closely. So what she's doing is she has that right shoulder pulled back initially, and the right side is moving backwards. And then as she plants the left foot, then she releases the right side. And that's what's giving that weight, because that left side is still moving back as the right side is releasing forward.
Oh, this makes me want to talk about something. Because this took me forever to like figure out on my own, because nobody talked about it specifically enough. Because if you have been a follow in West Coast Swing in the past 10 years, you have probably had someone yell at you, likely in a gentle way, but yelling nonetheless, that you should not pop your right knee on count 6 as a follow. You should not release it. And what they mean is to not hold your weight. They want you to settle into the connection. So like if we think of that that beautiful like S shape I did over Yenni in the last video, where she was like this and her hips were swung this way at the beginning of her anchor, and then her center didn't go anywhere. Instead, she ended up swinging her hips the other way and releasing her right foot. That is what they're talking about. That's holding your own weight in order to release your front foot. What we want is we want this center line to travel away from your leader just a little bit while you're doing the swing of the hips, because that's what, and it doesn't have to necessarily be your entire center. You could be shaping into it. So it could just be the shoulder that's connected. So like Alicia was saying, this shoulder of Tessa's right through here, you can see right there, it's moving that way. And Myles can feel that. And you can see how it naturally tethers her body, because she reaches the end of the rope and then this shoulder starts moving backwards as a result of having reached the end of that rope. But it's also important to keep in mind, just because her right shoulder reached the end of the rope doesn't mean she lets that shoulder rebound back at Myles. She's maintaining that tension, and you can see that. How she's maintaining a straight arm to maintain that tension. Science. All right, is there anything more about that one you wanted to talk about?
No, I think I'm good. I mean, I think the only other thing that I would add is that the very end of it, when you see her rotating with the right side forward, she straightens that left leg pretty quickly, but she does not allow that to push her forward. She still is hanging back, and that's what's creating that tension for Myles to work with.
Yeah, she actually doesn't start progressing forward until Myles's left foot actually progresses. It goes like 2 inches, not even that. It's like half an inch. So this is another thing that I wanted to highlight when you're watching a leader to see if they're holding their weight or not through a post. If a leader barely has to blink at a follow to get them to move on one, they likely did not have to hold their weight on an anchor through a post, because a post is used to start generating tension in the connection that can then be released. So a really good one, especially one that has power behind it, is a release of energy instead of generating that energy from scratch. So, and actually in a later timestamp of Myles, we'll see all he has to do is bring his left foot to his right foot and tap, and Tessa just goes. So the less a leader travels, it might actually indicate the more power that they have and the more connection there is between them and their follow. And I would like to highlight that even though Myles is a shorter leader, he can still do that. So yes, Sean has the advantage because he's like 6'1", 6'2", and he barely has to tip over 1 to 2 degrees for the follow to feel it. That is a bonus. I enjoy being tall for that reason. Get to be lazy. But if your follow is giving you the weight and connection, and you understand how to counterbalance it properly, you don't necessarily need more power to get the same effect as someone as tall as Sean McKeever.
Mhm.
All right, let's see what my note was for this one. Please hold. Oh yeah. So here we have, so we saw Sean do a grapevine kind of anchor, the strafing one at the beginning of the previous video. And this is Myles doing a very similar thing, but you can see how he's keeping his feet very much out ahead of him. And he's shaping. So his right shoulder is pulled back and his feet are way out ahead of him in order to counterbalance Tessa. And you can see right here, like his foot's here. He's like really sitting back into that. But you can really see how Tessa's positioning and grounding is allowing him to be in this position. If she weren't there for him, he would stumble backwards. And so that's what we mean by settling. It's not that your partner is counterbalancing 100% of your weight or momentum. They're counterbalancing part of it. I miss Vancouver.
Right.
Lasai. Let's see what this one is.
Oh, I think I had an interesting note for this one.
All right, cool. You go first.
So I wanted to look at what Tessa does here for a second because it's interesting. She kind of uses some rotation in order to really settle through what she's doing. So we have her hips turning to the left right here. She takes a step. It's a rather large step, but then she rotates her hips so that she's now facing Myles with them. And she does that with a soft knee. So it's not really bent, but not really straight either. And because of that, it allows her to really sit back as she rotates around. And so it's kind of like grinding against what he's giving her.
I love these kind of anchors where both of you are moving laterally, but in opposition to each other. So you're not only getting linear tension that is parallel to the slot, but you're getting lateral tension that is perpendicular to the slot. And so the arc doesn't simply end up being like down the slot, down in elevation and then back, or vice versa. It also has this same shape, but from a bird's eye view at an angle. So we've got this arc going through 3-dimensional space, not just on a 2D plane. And the shaping is really important for that. So in general, Tessa does tend to do these anchors where she starts by being opened up away from her partner to the left and then rotating and really pulling into that shoulder pocket with her connected shoulder. That's just something she tends to do foundationally in her anchors. But it's particularly important in this kind of dynamic because if she were to stay open to the park benches, that would put a lot of strain on her right shoulder and her rotator cuff. And then, what did I want to say about Myles? I don't remember. Let's find out. So you can see again, he is really playing with pitch and bringing his right foot in front of him. So he's not only pitching this way, but he's also pitching towards us in the camera away from Tessa. And he's using a really strong contra body to counterbalance her. So you can see his Oh, geez, my brain. What is that? I had a... That was the weirdest prompt. Did you see that?
No.
Okay, good. My computer just decided to have a small stroke. Okay. But he's really pulling his right shoulder back, and he's attempting to pull his left hip back as he's stepping back onto his left foot. And so by having this extreme pitch, like, yes, you could do that on your own, but you would need more speed. You'd need to have momentum to be able to counterbalance yourself through that. And so by nature of Tessa having weight and connection on the other end counterbalancing him, he's able to have more control. He's using her for that control and shaping.
Yeah.
And it creates a nice transition into the one.
Yeah, it does. I know that when I'm kind of looking for settling in a movement, I look to see if there is a free foot that's not really attached to the floor, because typically that means that there is something that's coming from the other end in order to kind of keep them in place.
Yep. And then I want to highlight again how little Myles has to move to lead the one. So his left foot is free. It places back behind him, but it's his center moving off of his right foot towards the back that is leading her forward. See, he picked up his left foot again, and he's kind of falling through space backwards.
Mm-hmm.
His left foot is catching underneath him.
Yeah.
And so that's what I mean by a leader. You can't really hold your weight through your one because the follow won't feel it. You need to take the follow with you through a controlled fall, as it were, in order for the follow to really feel your one and to be on time. Because if you really think of holding your weight as a leader and arriving as and sending your foot before your body, there's a disconnect there. You need to intend with your body first and then catch with your foot on a one. And just like what we've been talking about with the connected shoulder for the follow, as a leader, you need to make sure that your connected shoulder, if it's with your left hand or your right hand, whichever shoulder that is going with you, as opposed to staying in space and your hips kind of like penduluming out from underneath you down the slot.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the one I was talking about where he steps back onto his right and all he has to do is bring his center over that foot and tap. And then he can step sideways because Tessa's already coming forward.
Yeah, I think that this one's kind of interesting. It's kind of some double resistance, but a lengthier version of it because there's like 3 different times I think that they go back into a somewhat settled position.
Yeah, let me go back a little ways. Whoa, computer froze. There we go.
So we have this first one, and then they come forward. And this right here is interesting. They're not really settled from the hips because they are both kind of in a squatted position, and their upper bodies are staying more or less in a similar spot. So here you can really see that their upper bodies, they do move away from each other, but then they stop and the lower body continues.
My computer is not wanting to change frames. There we go.
So while there is connection, this right here is not necessarily a really settled position.
And
simply because of their upper bodies being really forward and the rest continuing.
Yeah. And the way Myles transitions is by taking that step back with his right a little bit further, and he takes his center over it. And he barely has to move past that point in order to encourage her to move forward.
Yep.
All right, let me see what the notes are for the next one. We'll do maybe one more. Was there something in particular that we haven't covered on this video yet that you want to do? Oh, there's one I wanted to do, but I asked you first.
You can go ahead and do whatever you want.
All right, cool. Because there's a literal breakaway here. And I just wanted to highlight how Myles then dances this like we saw Sean doing earlier, because they're literally not touching each other. He moved away. And see how he's very much over top of himself. And then he catches and is ready to counterbalance her. But just the way he does this positioning right through here, it's very similar to what Sean was doing in the previous dance. But you can see really how he settles through his hip right here, that Tessa is giving him weight in the connection and actually settling on the other side. Cool. Shall we stop the screen share portion of this evening's festivities? All right. Are there any questions, comments, concerns, bad jokes? We always take bad jokes here at Nerdy West Coast Swing for those who are new here. Sometimes they end up in the outtakes. Sometimes they are never shared. Anyways, just somebody else talk, so I'll stop.
I have no jokes, but I know you guys have covered this before, but what exactly is scrolling?
You want to take this one, Alicia?
I can, or you can.
Okay,
I don't know.
sure. Basically, scrolling is the action of traveling down the slot away from the stationary partner. So 99% of the time is the follow's job to do that, because the leader is the one who's stationary and the follow is moving away from them to establish connection. But it's a really important tool to have in the toolbox as a leader for gazillions of reasons. Either you're dancing with a newer follow who just doesn't know how to establish tension, and so you can help them by moving away from them, which, as Christopher Dumond mimed for us, can sometimes be hard because they'll just come towards you, even though you're like, no, stay back. But also on a crowded dance floor, you don't want to lob your follow into other dancers. So it can be helpful to travel away from them to establish connection. And it's also really important for trading places work. So understanding when and where and why as a leader to do some of the traveling on your follow's behalf is really important.
Yeah, that's what I would add, is that if there's if your follow doesn't have as much body flight, that's going to be a really good tool to use, for various reasons. But if your follow is not responding as well, that is a good way to kind of manage it and still make the dance move. Anyways, that's all I had to say.
Any other questions?
In the first video, one of the things I noticed is it was towards the end of our review of the clip. He ended up doing what kind of looked like an arm lead to me, and I'm wondering if that was trying to adapt for the lack of weight, because he kind of pulled her in and then she went around, but he was going almost, instead of going back to lead that, it looked like he was almost going side and forward with that.
That's a really good catch, and that's something that I was like, do I talk about the arm leading? Or do we have the time? Because that's something you see a lot in that video between Sean and Yenni, because to not arm lead, you need to have some form of resisted release or tension through the arm and through the shoulder. And if there's no weight to create that kind of spring through the leader's chest, shoulder, and arms, you can't lead from the body. So there ends up being additional guiding. So the arm ends up moving more to compensate for the lack of tension to be released. So yes, excellent observation.
Yeah. I think I want to add that, that's definitely not something that should be used on its own all the time. That is how things don't work very well.
Yeah, we're not a fan of arm leading here, but there are instances where that's your only choice as a leader. And it'll feel like nails on a chalkboard in your brain. You're like, oh no, this is what I have to do. But I shall do it for the greater good. No. It's interesting how, because I have now been leading West Coast Swing. Oh, geez, math. Oh, it's going to hurt. 14 and a half years now? Geez Louise, because I've been leading as long as I've been following. And the amount of ways I have to change my dance to adjust to everybody is bonkers. Like if I wanted to compile it all into a list, it would be a novel. And the simplest way that I can try to describe, it's like you're trying to give the follow the physics tools to make their job easier. And your goal as a leader is to get them to do their correct footwork, quote unquote. And however you have to adjust where your foot placement is, where your weight placement is, where the timing of your weight transfers in relation to your foot strike. It's all manipulation to get the follow to look good. And if you can get your follow to look good, you look amazing. This is why I am loved so much, because I'm like, how do I get this follow to look incredible? And
that is the thought process that you should go for.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. That let me follow more, because I get asked to lead all the time and I like leading, but geez, help me out here, people.
What was I going to add to that? I was going to add something. I was going to add that a lot of higher level follows will also do the same thing for leads that are not as experienced, or, just have maybe developed some weird habits or something, and a lot of times any higher level follow, you can sometimes see dancing with bad technique because they need to adjust for something. And sometimes that is the way to adjust to a lead that is doing something that is not helpful. So
yeah. And they could even be doing something correct, but you have an injury going on and you're just like, I can't do the correct thing right now because XYZ. So I'm going to compensate. It's going to feel weird. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We're all human, right? We hand animated a nerdy thing for our Patreon last month, and we're going to give a little teaser of it on YouTube. So visualizing music. Have you gotten a chance to look at it yet, Andrew? Sweet. I guess I can stop the recording now.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
That's amazing, visualizing music, because I'm still trying to fully understand all of the rhythmical influences of music. And it's like, I'm really smart, but I learn kind of slowly. And I have to understand things in a really deep way in order to actually get them. And music and musicality is like, I can kind of get it, I can get there, but it isn't a fluid language yet.
Right.
Yeah.
And visualization helps me a lot. So that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, you have our permission to just join the Patreon for 1 month to get that. And then stay if you're addicted. But we won't fault you, because that's some like high quality content. We went above and beyond for our musicality month.
Yeah, we did. And we were talking about how to kind of add that in more.
Oh yeah, we're doing more. I forgot.
Yeah, because it was highly appreciated by people. So
yeah,
we're trying to add it in some more and figuring out how to do so. So we're kind of changing the format a little bit, actually. So.
Yeah, but in good ways. We really want our... Oh, yeah, you go.
Is the Patreon link in the Facebook event, or should I search for something on there?
It should be in the Facebook event. It's just patreon.com/nerdywcs. We keep
That's
it
easy.
simple here.
Yep.
This is a really handy brand. I'm glad we got it before Ben McHenry snatched it up, because you know that would be a subset of Dance Geek.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ooh, that'd be a fun crossover. Dance Geek meets nerdy West Coast swing.
I think it needs to be a dance battle.
Have a good night, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back next week with another glorious topic. We're talking about energy resolution versus finishing your movement. So kind of an extension of tonight, but more play and dancing than the connection to West Coast swing.
Yep.
Today is his birthday. So when we call it a night, I was thinking we could all sing happy birthday for him to discover in the outtakes this week. Yes.
There's now no more tub running, so
Fingers
maybe
crossed, knock on wood.
we'll see.
Yay, neighbors.
It ran about 20 minutes ago too, so no guarantees here.
All right.
You talking about Yenni's last name. Every single time I go to like think or say something about Warren, I always go to Wayne first. I'm like, that's not right. I know that's not right. Like, I've had conversations with him and danced with. I'm like, I know this is. I know that's not correct.
Yeah. I don't know what it is. Just some people, their names just do not stick in my head. There is no rhyme or reason to it. I've known them for years. I adore them. But does their name stick? No. The frame I have it on to start, they're both like.
It's like when they look at the audience.
Kind of, I don't know, it's a really kind of awkward freeze frame for the smile. Like, I know they're genuine smiles, but this particular moment's a little like.
So before we start, I want to say, so I was framing through the Myles and Tessa video and I noticed two things actually. So one, that video was posted in January, and two, if you look in the background at the people, they have intense coats on. Like, oh, it must be very cold.
Yeah.
And they're in like short sleeves. I'm like, and there's one point where Tessa goes behind Myles and it's like just him facing the camera and he does this like,
Yeah, I saw that.
Like when you exercise outside and it's really cold.
Yeah, it's really cold. And you got some post-nasal drip going on. I was actually going to talk to you about that because, oh, it's me. That might have actually been what made me think, wait, I'm a 6 foot tall Myles Monroe. But actually, though, I can't unsee it. The way he counters her, like I had to analyze it in depth for today. And I'm like, that's what I do.
It's very, very similar.
That's funny. Is up. Oh, let's not do hot pink tonight. That was a bit much last week. But let's go back to green. So first, we wanted to note the adorable smiles in this freeze frame. Slightly awkward, but it's just the magic of capturing every moment in time. Oh, I accidentally moved the frame. I have no idea what I just did. I've never accidentally touched the tracking bar with the pen before. That's new. What's really fun is when, because I tend to have a very light connection as a follow, because 99% of leaders do not have realize how much they need to counterbalance me. So I just default on the side of light. But then what happens is something happened behind my leader that they were not aware of. Like suddenly a couple appeared behind them in close proximity and they have no idea. So I just don't move on a 1. And then they just like hit this end of this like boulder line and they ricochet back at me. It's hilarious. It is so funny. It's one of my favorite things.
That's follow to the rescue right there. Like, honestly, you're saving the lead from looking really bad and pissing off some other people too, right?
Yeah. It's so funny though, because the look on their face, they're like, you became a tree. What? I don't understand.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, that reminds me of the other story. I forget. We were talking about being dizzy earlier, like in between the two videos.
Yeah.
One funny story way back in the day. I have like fun vision and I also have snowy vision. So like dancing at night in a dark studio can be fun when you're mostly blind, but add a disco ball to that. A friend of mine once led me in like a really aggressive, like totally normal, should have been fine, like triple spin down the line. I think we were dancing hustle or something. But I happened to be spinning in the same direction as the fast disco ball lights on the floor. And that it just wrecked my world. I kept leaning. I'm usually very good because I've been doing Shanae turns since I was like 3, right? I'm usually fine, but the lights just like tilted my world. And luckily he caught me in a great dip, but I'm just like, wow, that could have ended poorly. I don't like disco balls. I mean, if they're going nice and slow or they're just kind of chilling back and forth like a wallflower, I'm good with that. Spinning, no.
Anyways.
Don't we have to sing happy birthday?
Oh yeah. Okay, so it's Aaron's birthday, and he can't be here with us tonight because I assume he is partying hard. I don't know, but here I'm gonna put it on gallery view. So if you feel comfortable videoing yourself and unmuting yourself, I'll count us in 5, 6, 7, 8, and then we will sing happy birthday to Aaron. And if you know any of the stuff that goes after, just feel free to keep going. I feel so inspired. It's not necessary. Anyways, 5, 6, 7, 8. Happy birthday to you.
Happy
birthday
birthday
to you. Happy
Happy
birthday,
dear
dear Aaron.
Happy
Happy birthday to you. And many more on Channel 4. Anyways, I feel really old. I remember I was somewhere, it must have been at a restaurant. Somebody was singing happy birthday, like they were doing that thing. And then this group of young kids kept singing. And I'm like, I've never heard these extra verses before. Whatever happened to Scooby-Doo on Channel 2 and Frankenstein on Channel 9? They were singing other things.
Did you have the clicky channels that were on a knob as a kid? So that was where we were at. It's a little tiny TV about as big as my laptop is right now.
Someone in my family had one of those. I didn't personally, but I did have to do the thing where I had to stand up and like walk across the room, change channel. I remember that. I had a rotary phone at one point. Yeah.
Back when I was a kid,
I
had to walk over to the TV to turn the channel.
Yeah. I'm one of those old millennials on TikTok. It's great. It's fun.
I haven't made it to TikTok yet.
I both say do it as soon as you can and never go because you can't turn back. It's too much fun.
MySpace.
MySpace. Criminy.
Facebook came along and was like, guess what?
Do you remember the MySpace personality quizzes?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I once took the like which Star Trek character one you are. And I came out equally, like 75%, because the math didn't make sense. You could be 75% in one thing and 75% another thing. Remember? Like it was BS.
You're just 150%.
I was 75% Picard and wait for it, 75% red shirt. Equally indisposable and disposable.
I mean, Picard is a red shirt technically, right?
Technically, but
not really, yeah.
But not in the he's destined to die in 5 minutes red shirt kind of way.
Yeah.
I appreciate that personally.
You're welcome. My priority is to keep my follows alive. Points be damned. You'd be surprised how few have that same priority.
Yeah.
It hurts my soul.
The important things, you know.
Yeah.
Human bodies work.
We're still animals, if you hadn't noticed.
Oh my goodness. I'm really glad that you were still recording that.
Well, we'll see if I have the guts to put that in the very beginning of play. Yeah. I always worry about that there is like certain Westies that YouTube suggests our videos, and then they open it and they expect some sort of swing content, and they get an outtake of me being an idiot for like 10 seconds, or Christopher Dumont being an idiot for 10 seconds before the intro, and then we're smart.
Yeah.
I've been like, maybe I should put like smart content at the beginning as like a teaser, like this is what you shall learn. But
It's less
like,
entertaining.
my body just digs in its heels and is like, no, thou shalt be funny. So many of us are introverts, and we're just like, back off.
Yeah.
I has bubble can respect.
Right.
When I get tired, I also get salty. Like, you don't think I'm a cruel person, but every once in a while, I will bite someone's head off. It scares my friends when it happens. It's great. That's my favorite part, is looking over and seeing their jaws just dropped.
I feel like a Cassie Smackdown would be very entertaining to watch. I don't know.
Cassie Smackdown.